Quite a lot of our attention when it comes to these massive global environmental challenges tends to be drawn towards the climate change issue. And of course, for very good reason, and we're reminded of that repeatedly now with record-breaking weather across the world, with extreme heat, floods, droughts, amongst the many impacts that are now visible. Less obvious, but of equal and indeed even greater importance very often, is the decline of nature. Happening in parallel with the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is the progressive decline in the health of the natural world. And you can see this through various sets of data that have been accumulating over many years. For example, in the decline in the abundance of different species, some that used to be very common, but which are now becoming scarce. You can see it in the ever-lengthening lists of endangered species, which only increase in number each time we conduct a review. And then, of course, the loss and degradation of entire ecosystems with tropical rainforests and shallow water coral reefs amongst some of the higher profile examples. When this set of data is presented to decision makers, we still find, however, great reluctance in taking the kinds of decisive actions needed to reverse these trends, whether it's arising from intensive agriculture, the release of pollution, or the large-scale degradation of habitats that should be protected. We still find a familiar narrative being put into play. It is argued that we should sacrifice nature and we should allow damaging activities to continue because this will improve economic growth and thereby improve conditions for people. This, of course, could not be further from the truth, and it is vitally important that we now shift this narrative, because the truth is that healthy nature is vital for our collective economic well-being, for public health, and for the security of societies across the world. We need, in other words, to protect nature not only for its own sake and for its beauty and its intrinsic values, but we need to protect nature because it is vital for human development, public health, and security in different ways. Take our food system. Sometimes we hear arguments put into play to the effect that we shouldn't change agricultural practices to favour biodiversity in farmed landscapes because there is a choice between food security on the one side and the protection of nature on the other. The fact, of course, is that our food security fundamentally relies upon healthy natural systems, productive soils with their trillions of microorganisms recycling nutrients, the provision and the maintenance of soil humidity coming from the availability of fresh water, not only falling as rain, but being retained by healthy soils. And those same soils, of course, are holding vast quantities of carbon, thereby making a direct link through to the climate change issue. And when it comes to climate change, of course, we know that we can be far more resilient, and our ability to adapt to what's coming rendered all the more effective through the protection and enhancement of natural systems. Blanket bogs and floodplains hold vast quantities of water, and as we experience more intense rainfall events, these are going to be the kinds of systems that can help to make communities resilient. And we know that at the same time as we will suffer more and more intense heat waves, that one of the ways in urban areas we can help to shield the population from that kind of extreme weather is through the provision of structurally complicated green spaces with many trees, with shrubs, with grasslands, and of course blue spaces that help to evaporate water, at the same time bringing wildlife into the heart of our city centres. And that act of bringing wildlife into our city centres, of course, will have huge benefits for public health and well-being. We now have a warehouse full of data revealing the positive synergies between access to natural areas and to physical and psychological health in people. And we know that if we do this well, this has socially progressive advantages linked to it too, because the people who have least access to those beautiful vistas with birdsong, views of trees, the sound of running water. The people who have least access to that are people on low incomes and people of colour, certainly in Western countries. So there's every good reason why we should now be investing in the recovery of nature for growth, health and security, and doing that at scale, and doing that in ways that makes not only good sense in the sense of being able to hold carbon out of the atmosphere and in ecosystems, but also to be making sure that we can adapt to the inevitable climate changes that are coming. Now, to discuss some of this and related questions, we now have a panel conversation, which we will now join up here on the stage. Jarvis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony. I'd like to invite to the stage Domingo Pease, all the way from the Amazonian jungle, with Atosa Sultani, also part of the Sacred Headwaters Foundation, and Dan Bradbury from World Land Trust. Just a little bit of an introduction, and please do come and... So, what we have here is we have Tony Juniper, who is now Chair of Natural England, actually advised for the now King Charles III on the Rainforest Alliance, was it Rainforest? Prince's Rainforest Trust, my apologies. And so Tony's been involved in, obviously, Amazonian protection and rainforest protection for a very long time. Now he's Chair of Natural England, so he's looking after our country's nature and biodiversity. We have Dan Bradbury from World Land Trust, who World Land Trust have been one of the very, very early adopters that were buying up swaths of land to protect it, to protect corridors, to protect nature. They really were one of the early adopters in that space, founded by a dear friend of ours, the late John Burton. And of course, we have Domingo Pease, who is clearly an Amazonian leader, who has set up with Atosa the Sacred Headwaters organization, who are trying to protect the nature that we so badly need. So thank you very much, and I'll pass the microphone back to you, Tony, to take the lead. Thank you.
Thank you. And what would you like to cover, Jarvis? What's the kind of thematic space we'd like to...
Let's talk about the stuff that you know, so nature and its importance and its resilience and the value of it, where we are in today's picture.
Yeah. Very good. So having made a few opening remarks about the value of nature, really speaking from a perspective that comes from working in England for many years, I wonder what it's like in tropical countries. Do you still find this same story whereby we are encouraged to see nature as expendable for economic growth rather than protecting in order to defend the interests of people across the world? Domingo, what's your view on that?
Buenas tardes con todos, con todas. Sobre el punto que estamos discutiendo, analizando este momento, desde la mirada de los pueblos indígenas, la Amazonía es un ser vivo que toda empresa depende de la Amazonía.
From the perspective, well, thank you this afternoon, it's great to be here. From the perspective of indigenous peoples in the Amazon is a living being, and that all companies, all entities depend on the living forest.
Es importante de que todo nuestro planeta, nuestra madre tierra es como ser humano. Está conformado Amazonía, Oceanía, Ártico, que tenemos que los humanos cuidar un conjunto.
Just like a human body, the planet is a living entity. All of the ecosystems, all of the biomes of the planet, the oceans, the Arctic, the Amazon, they work together to keep the organism of the living earth alive.
También quería informarles que mucha gente de Europa, más que todo, piensan que la Amazonía está lejos. El problema de la Amazonía no afecta al mundo humano, a la naturaleza, o sea, al continente, no. La Amazonía da vida a todo continente. Entonces, tan importante de que todos seamos responsables, cuidadores de la naturaleza.
In places like England, you might say that the Amazon is so far away, it has nothing to do with us here. But really, what we need to understand, and science agrees with us, that the destruction of the Amazon has global consequences, that the entire planet depends on the health of the Amazon basin. And that's why we all have to commit to defend and protect these vital organs of the planet.
Para concluir, yo quería invitar a todos, a todas, al mundo entero, hombres, jóvenes, mujeres, profesionales, gobiernos, empresas y los pueblos indígenas, que es hora que hagamos ya en el territorio la acción. Ya ha habido mucho discurso, no hay acciones en territorio. Debemos hacer acciones ya en el territorio.
And I want to just conclude by saying I'm calling for action. I call on all of us, women, men, business people, academics, young people, investors, donors. We have to work together. We have to take action to defend the front lines of the living earth, the front lines of nature, and that is working in the territories. There's a lot of pledges, a lot of promises that we're going to support in the territories and the forest. We're going to take action, but there isn't enough happening. We need action, not just talk, and the time to do that is now, and the way to do it is together.
Para agradecer al equipo, a mi equipo Atosa, a la Lucía, que nos acompañan para hacer alianza, para articular una alianza conjunta, los indígenas, los pueblos del mundo, para que todos juntos podamos proteger la vida humana. Muchas gracias.
And really, I want to thank the team, Atosa, Lucia, all of you, all of the allies. It's time to form alliances. It's time to join together to defend life, to defend the planet. And that's the only way to do it is through working together, hand in hand, in alliances. Thank you very much for this time.
Thank you very much, Domingo. So, Dan, from your perspective as a UK-based NGO and hearing this philosophical perspective from a leader working at the front line in the Amazon, how do you find the challenge of bridging that gap to get people here to really understand the implications of what's going on and then to get the support that Domingo and his colleagues need to be able to make a difference?
From our point of view, so my entire role is about telling stories and trying to engage people. So the only way we're actually going to make a difference is if we allow people to understand the impact it has on them personally. That's the only way things are going to change. And that's the same for businesses as well. So we work with a lot of businesses and we receive funding from businesses. But our starting point is, well, what is the impact for their business as a whole? Because they're being driven by the need to create profits and bring money in. So for us, it can be this kind of trying to get this concept across of what's happening in all of these countries where we're working, so whether it's the Amazon or other areas in Brazil, is how does that impact them? What is the impact for them? What is going to be the long-term issue? But just going back to one of your earlier points, what we're seeing is we're seeing this ever-increasing challenge for us in terms of the cost of carrying out conservation is increasing. So when John Burton founded the organisation at the beginning, it was, in some places we could protect land for, say, £25 an acre. Now there's very few projects where we can do that. The cost, because we're competing against agriculture, large-scale industry, about people making money, and that's the difficulty. So all of our partners, and that's why we work with local organisations, because we channel funds to them because they know all of those challenges. But that's our biggest challenge, is that constant increase in the price of land and to carry out the work.
So I guess in some ways that increasing price of land, it's a kind of a reflection of scarcity and the fact that we've got multiple pressures for the same land, and keeping it as a primeval rainforest is no longer something that can compete in the market, as it were, in terms of the value for the land for soya beans or palm oil? Is that more or less how the tendency
look,
has gone?
it's a really complicated issue because, and a lot of it is coming down to pressures on those lands. So the increase in population, the increase in our desire for products and our products to work in various ways. So if you take the issue of palm oil, the reality is the product, it's a good product. And actually, it's really high yielding. You don't need that much land. But the problem is we use so much of it because of the level of consumption. So to fulfill that constant need for consumption, those are the challenges facing. So it's not just palm oil, and it could be anything. It could be rubber, it could be pineapple, it could be all of those things. It's that constant pressure and that constant need for more stuff.
Yeah, so the market and the economy is demanding more and more, and nature is on the receiving end of the consequences. I wonder if I might just ask Domingo what kind of pressures are most prevalent at the moment in the Western Amazon. That market signal, how is it manifest? Is it agriculture? Is it oil? Is it gas? All of the above, I expect.
El motor más fuerte de la deforestación, Cuencas Sagradas conserva 35 millones de hectáreas, pero aquí hay grandes amenazas de tala de árboles para el comercio y también la minería ilegal, escala muy grande, y eso es lo más fuerte que está pasando ahora en la Amazonía, de toda la Amazonía existente.
Well, just to say that the sacred headwaters that we're working to protect, the bioregion is 35 million hectares. To give you perspective, it's a huge area. And within this area, but also throughout the Amazon, we share some of the drivers of deforestation are the same. For example, right now we have logging, the drive to get the valuable trees, the fine hardwoods, that is degrading the forest. And of course, we have illegal mining and legal large-scale mining that is basically a new and growing threat to huge areas of the forest. Minerals, of course, for even transition.
We're seeing that in a lot more countries now. That's kind of seems to be definitely on the increase.
This is informal mining activities for the technology sectors?
Bueno, para el mundo moderno sirve para todo. La tecnología es importante en la minería. El problema más crítico es que no hay ninguna ley que garantiza sobre el control, la limpieza de esta contaminación. Es el problema que existe en toda Amazonía.
Of course, minerals are important for every sector of the economy and for the transition, but what we are facing right now is a mining at scales that are out of control. There's no control, there's no supervision, there's no requirement, there's no laws that say that after the company's done mining the minerals that they have to clean it up or remediate adequately. So it's kind of a free-for-all in terms of the expansion of the mining sector. And I will just add maybe to Domingo's, y voy a agregar algo. The new thing that we've seen explode throughout the Amazon basin is illegal mining. In addition to the large-scale legal mining, the illegal mining has exploded throughout the Amazon basin, and it's mostly for gold. And gold is a product that's being held seen as more secure than currency. So there's a drive, price of gold is up to $5,000 an ounce. That's driving illegal mining in huge areas of territory which contaminate with mercury and other contaminants, huge areas of the Amazon. And so those are and partly that is a way that it's a money laundering operation. So drug trafficking money from drug trade, cannot enter the banking system the only way it enters the banking system is that the mafias invest that money in dredges, illegally gold mine or log, and then the gold and the logs end up in the commodities market. And that's what, is a huge, it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars, which we're seeing affect the headwaters and many other parts of the Amazon.
And so the remedy to this, I would guess, would be better government enforcement of environmental laws, and there being some agencies that can be able to take control not only of the legal activities but also the illegal activities. Is that where it goes, to government?
A ver, para mí la solución urgente es crear conciencia humana, educar a los jóvenes hombres y mujeres para que sean verdaderamente gobernantes con responsabilidad. Ningún gobierno en Latinoamérica respeta la ley y cumple la ley. Hay mucha corrupción, no vale nada la ley de cada país latinoamericano.
So first I want to say that from my perspective, given that indigenous territories, and I'm adding this as a context, indigenous territories are literally half of the intact forests. And that really what Domingo is saying is that the people in the ground need livelihood alternatives. They need human consciousness needs to increase our consciousness and create alternatives, livelihood alternatives, so that people in the forest and stay connected to their forest and protect their forest and not get tempted by these sectors. For me, the government in every country in Latin America is very corrupt. There is no government in Latin America that has demonstrated authentic commitment to enforcement of the rules or enforcement of the laws that are already on the books. So I don't have faith in government's enforcement. What I want to see is that the people have alternatives so that they can resist.
Okay.
El último, para cuencas sagradas, la mejor solución por sistema actual es crear programas alternativas en el territorio. Por ejemplo, la conservación es la única para no llegar al punto de no retorno. 2, hay que implementar programas de bioeconomía, soberanía alimentaria para el pueblo, para garantizar el buen vivir del pueblo. Tercero es cambiar inmediatamente energías renovables, ya no de combustible. Eso sería ya parar este momento el problema climático.
And like I said, we have to create livelihood alternatives in the territories. And what do I mean by that are 3 things. We have to create programs that are for food security, where people have livelihoods and are able to address their forest products that serve them. The other is bioeconomy, the idea of value chains that support conservation and programs for payment for conservation. So those are two different programs. And then lastly, we have to create, programs. ¿Cuál es el tercero?
Energías alternativas.
Alternative energy. That is, we really need to get communities off of fossil fuels and allowed to have alternative energy programs in the territories.
Okay, so Dan, what we're hearing is a massive demand signal coming from the global economy for gold, for palm oil, for soya beans, for logs, for fossil fuels. At the same time, on the ground, we hear about the inability of governments to control this, or indeed their lack of interest in doing so, with some challenges of governance straying in some countries into corruption. So what would we do as Western environmentalists? So we've spent many decades campaigning for protected areas. Some of the places we've actually bought with supporters' money in this part of the world. What Domingo is saying is that this is really a social problem about the people on the ground and their ability to deal with the lack of governance and to deal with that market signal through having control of the territory and having livelihoods that can keep them on that territory. Is this something that is now part of your strategy?
Yeah, we're seeing literally everywhere we're working. It's no different anywhere in the world. It's around providing opportunities. If people have opportunities, then people will buy into what you're trying to do and what we're trying to do. So, because ultimately, we're asking some of the the poorest people in the world to solve the problem being created by some of the richest. So we have to provide opportunities for them. So what we try and do is we try and bring people together. It's about creating a network, enabling and being enablers for people to be able to support these projects. And I think that's the only way we can do it. But what we need to do is we need a lot more alignment between organizations. I think that we need, there's so many different levels of certification and so many different protocols for people to follow, is actually we need to come together at things like COP and actually come out with some decisions.
So what Domingo said, I mean, it was very much what you're saying, Dan, is this plea for a united effort. And so we have the private sector, we have the investors, we have the NGOs, we have governments, we have official agencies, we have the scientific community. How can we pull this together in a more effective and more united way to get the breakthroughs that we need? Because each of those different sectors of the solution, they sometimes say the right things in different ways, but how do we pull them together to make them something that can deliver at scale on the ground? I mean, have you had any attempts to try and foster some of these multi-sector partnerships?
Yeah, look, we work with many organisations. So, you know, we've got 55 partners now. And, but what we need people from all these different sectors to come together and have a collective response to it. Because our partners on the ground, they're not just doing one thing. So they're not just buying and protecting bits of land. So as an example, in the project in Guatemala, they're working with women's health, they're working with local fishermen, they're working with local tourism. So there's lots of expertise and knowledge that needs to come into it. But the thing that we have to be really clear of is we have to give the people in those countries and in those projects a voice. Because ultimately, they're the ones who know what the issues are. They're the ones who understand what the problems are in those countries. So best will in the world, I can't sit here and understand exactly what's happening in this Amazon Headwaters project. I can only hear what's told. So we need to provide the voice. We need to provide the opportunities for all of these people to have their input and have their say in how we try and solve this problem. So as an organization, we have this kind of, this brand sentiment, we call it, and it's like actions that lead to incredible chain reactions. So the more people together, the greater impact that we can have.
Okay, thank you. So, so Domingo, you're here in London Climate Action Week, seeking to gain support for what you're doing with the Amazon Headwaters Alliance work. What would be a good outcome for you in terms of that kind of partnership that's needed to support change on the ground? What could be the manifestation of a more coherent response to what you're seeking to achieve?
Bueno, yo he viajado mucho, he estado en encuentros muy grandes y estoy creando alianzas, estoy creando unidad, pero no es efectivo. Entonces ahora estoy buscando empresas, personas naturales que quieren hacer alianza para el territorio, para acciones con el pueblo, para mi pueblo, no para mí, sino para la conservación. Entonces, espero seguir haciendo más alianza con todos los sectores sociales de este país o de otros países del mundo.
So I've been traveling a lot. I've been going to lots of events and looking for support, looking for allies. I don't know if I've been effective. I don't know this, that the alliances that we're building are effective. What I hope for is I'm here to build unity. I'm here to recruit allies. I want to be able to call on companies, on individuals, on organizations to stand with us and help us deliver resources and support to the front lines. I'm here to work for the people of the forest and not for myself. And that part of my work, part of how do we do that is by investing in the front lines. And so for me, results would be to have allies who are ready to work with us to deliver resources to the front lines to solve some of these problems with the people who have the forest.
Estoy cansado, pero sí quisiera hacer luz pública. Si los indígenas que manejamos nuestro territorio entramos con el sistema extractiva como dueños, la Amazonía se acaba en 10 años y se colapsa el mundo. Estamos sosteniendo la vida, estamos invitando al mundo para garantizar la vida humana.
Yeah, I'm a little tired, but I continue to want to invite support and invite unity. Just think about it. Indigenous peoples, we are the landowners of a huge majority of the intact forests in the Amazon. If indigenous people, because they couldn't meet their basic needs, were forced to enter the extractive economy and decide to sell their timber, or their oil, or their resources, the Amazon would be destroyed within a decade. It would if they did that, if they made that switch. But that's not what we're doing. We're trying to find ways to really engage in the alternative livelihoods and provide resources and support so that indigenous people stay firm. They have already committed to protect their forests. And so how can the world stand with them? How can we unite to stand with the people who've already made the commitment? Because on the contrary is unthinkable.
Thank you, Domingo. And from what I've seen, you've been making a huge difference and being able to reveal that opportunity for the world to solve multiple environmental problems through what is in the end a small investment in the welfare of the indigenous societies. It's a huge opportunity you've brought to all of us here at London Climate Action Week. Dan.
We've spoken a lot, or you've asked us a lot of questions, so I was going to ask you something. So you've been working tirelessly on this subject for a good number of years, and you have been bringing this to people's attention. What have you seen change in your time in this? You know, have you seen a shift in people's mentality around the environment and environmental causes? Or I'm kind of interested to hear it from your side as well, because in the time I've been working at World Land Trust, in 14 years, I've seen a change. I've seen a shift in people's thought processes. Still not quite enough, but I'm just interested in what you've seen over the time you've been involved in conservation.
Well, it's very complicated, but I think one of the things to observe just at the moment in 2026 is this paradoxical situation whereby we have not only more evidence than ever before about the disastrous ecological situation that we're moving into, but at the same time as we have that evidence coupled now with real-world events, we have the voices that would say that we should do less or nothing about it louder than ever. And this is really quite paradoxical if you look at the calls now to abandon climate change targets, to drill, baby, drill. This comes at a moment when we have more awareness and more knowledge than ever before, which makes me conclude that this is not really a problem that is about lack of information or about awareness. It's about who has control of the political agenda, who has control of the media, and in whose interests are we acting. Because at the moment, we are not acting in the interests of future generations, nor are we acting in the interests of many people who are already alive, including the indigenous people living in the Amazon. And so correcting that is a big and deep problem that I don't think is going to be solved by publishing more reports about how hot it is or how we're going to lean into more extreme, dangerous conditions. This is at its heart fundamentally a philosophical and a political problem, and I don't think that many of us yet have caught up with what we need to do about that, and certainly I'm still thinking it through.
Yeah, so I work in comms. And what we've done is we've managed to create these echo chambers where people are just shouting to people that think the same as them. And it's that art of conversation or understanding and listening to other people's point of view has just really stopped. But also, I won't mention the particular platform just in case they watch the video of this, but as an organization, we've had adverts banned and we've been put into the same category as people with extremist views and terrorist organizations because we mentioned climate change.
Oh my goodness.
So, and that's what people aren't seeing happening.
No.
So that's the challenge that we're facing. So everybody's comms teams will be facing the same issue.
Okay.
And that's what's happening, is that, you know, we are creating these echo chambers, and it doesn't matter whether it's around conservation or whatever. What you've just got is people shouting at people about the same thing until it's compounded that their beliefs, and it really instills their beliefs. But that discussion has gone.
Yeah, well, there we are. So you're encapsulating something that I think is there for us to glimpse, but really is at the heart of this problem now in terms of who's got control of the media, who's got control of the political discussion, who's got control of the agenda. And this is really quite a profound and extremely challenging situation. So Domingo is working in very different circumstances from all of us, coming to the global stage and sharing his story. Does he feel as though the story is being heard? Are enough people hearing what needs to be said about the plight of the Amazon and its people?
Sí, soy escuchado. Yo gobierno con 30 pueblos indígenas con más de 1,000 comunidades y hasta ahora el compromiso de conservación sostenemos, comprometimos y mantenemos. Al mundo exterior entiendo que algunos muy poco entienden, pero no hay voluntad. He visto yo, no hay conciencia, no hay voluntad, más hay ambición y el poder político.
So yes, I do feel like I'm being increasingly heard. And, you know, I should say that within our territories, we're getting better and better organized. We have 30 indigenous nations, over 1,000 communities, and like I said, 35 million hectares. And within then, we are governors of these territories, and we are making commitments, and we are uniting and gaining force. And globally, when I travel, yeah, there are some great allies that hear us and want to support us. But there isn't a predominant consciousness. There isn't overarching, dominant consciousness around how these issues are viewed. There isn't political will. And that ultimately we're suffering from what is just a drive for profit, a drive for an ambition for basically profit motive that's driving most of the what actions that we see.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this short panel. We've talked about rising global demand for everything. We've talked about challenges of governance and the application of the law in remote areas of rainforest. We've had a discussion about some of the big drivers in play now in terms of the political agenda in different parts of the world, and indeed who's controlling the message and the media. Let's just finish with your thoughts on what gives you most optimism as to how we're going to crack this problem. We're going to get to the other side, we're going to stop deforestation, we're going to go nature positive, and at the same time, we're going to get climate change under control. Dan, what's the thing that gives you hope that we're going to do this?
I think the thing that gives me hope is that actually in the short period of time, relatively, that I've been working in this sphere of conservation, is that it is actually becoming more visible. It is becoming, there are more people speaking about it. When I first started at World Land Trust, so 13 years ago, trying to find anything in the media about it was basically impossible. So I think but also to add to that is that whilst we need to be really careful that we don't put too much pressure on that next generation coming through, is that, I see it in my kids and I see it in their friends, this absolute desire to try and make a difference. And I think that's the thing that keeps me positive and keeps me going.
Thank you, Dan. So greater awareness and people yearning to make a difference. Domingo, what's your source of hope and motivation?
Bueno, para ser realista y concreto, yo confío a mi pueblo. El pueblo indígena cuida, conserva, porque somos parte de la naturaleza. Nosotros cuidamos sin afín de dinero. Es tan diferente del mundo occidental. En ese sentido, yo confío en mi pueblo. Mi pueblo va a garantizar la existencia del bosque primario.
So what I would say, what gives me hope, is that I trust the indigenous people of my people. I trust the people of the forest. They have made huge commitment. They live every day protecting and defending their living forest as a way of life. It's so different than the outside world. They're not driven by the money incentive. They're driven by something beyond money, that is this living forest and the generations of life. And so for me, I would say my faith is in my people.
Lo otro, estoy de acuerdo con el Señor, en la juventud. La juventud es la esperanza. Tenemos que entrenar a los jóvenes para que ellos sean los próximos gobernantes, pero con confianza, el trabajo con amor y con corazón. Tengo esperanza en la juventud.
My other hope is, I agree with you, is the youth. I have a lot of faith in youth. We have to help train and support and mentor the next generation to be good governors of the territories, and that we have to invest in them with all of our love and support. We have to work with love, work with trust, and really, for me, the youth give me hope.
Y el último, yo tengo esperanza de la alianza. Ahora los indígenas también estamos proponiendo al gobierno, proponiendo propuesta a Naciones Unidas. Somos escuchados y estamos tejiendo alianza con personas de diferentes sectores. Ahí está la esperanza.
And I believe in building alliances. And for us, indigenous peoples, we are being heard. We're coming to the UN. We are proposing, policies and rules at the UN at the highest levels of the debate globally, and that we are getting somewhere with those commitments, and that really funding important people to connect with, having important allies, that also gives me hope.
What gives you hope, Tony?
I think if there is a way through this, as I said earlier, it's going to be in quite a deep change in culture and philosophical perspectives, which then leads through into changes in policy. And I think, Domingo's point there about connecting indigenous wisdom with the work of treaty processes in climate change and biodiversity, if we can find a way of linking that with a deeper shift in human consciousness, which is about moving people from being simply consumers of stuff and people who accumulate wealth into being stewards of our collective life support system, then that is going to be the most powerful breakthrough of all, which takes us into completely different territory to where many of us have been working for a very long time in garnering scientific understanding and applying that to policy. It's taken us so far, but this deeper shift is one that we now need to take, and the indigenous peoples of the world invite us to go on the journey that they are on, and to do that in common cause and to do it as a global effort. So thank you very much indeed, Domingo and Dan, and I do hope you found that of interest, and we've shed some light on some very big issues. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Come up and then they can hear you. What's the question?
Hi. My question is, my interest is supply chains and systems change. So I like to learn where things come from and where they go to. And my roots are in Africa, Kenya, and India. And to keep it short and sweet, when I learned about all this climate change stuff, I was curious because I just don't have a UK perspective. I have the perspective of my roots. And from a religious perspective, I'm asking this, which is when I see the mines in Jharkhand, which is where the Adivasis are, tribes of India, and I'm looking at the temples of the Jains, Hindus, and Buddhists. They're slowly being encroached on. This is 10 years ago. Temples are getting smaller, mines are getting bigger, forests are reducing. And I started asking this for the last 15 years. And I was like, what are these minerals that they're digging up and what products are they being turned into? Because, in the UK, India is a supply chain. I come back to the UK, and then I follow the same route to Peru, the same route to South America, same route to Africa. And exactly the same problems that this lady said over here, the child trafficking, the labor trafficking, the sex trafficking. The one common theme is all the minerals that are dug up from Peru to India, to Africa, to Congo, aside from the fossil fuels, they're all the minerals required for this green transition. And I was like, what the hell? I thought this was green. Then I look at the supply chain a bit deeper, and I speak to companies, and they says, yes, green energy that we're making, the devices, the products, but we can't do it without burning fossil fuels, because fossil fuels is baseline energy. So I was like, oh, okay. So my question then on top of that is, that to the global north, you want green solutions, but for you to get your green solutions, I have to lose my land or stolen, like this person here, and people are selling it as green. So what is the reason to yourself, Tony, that we should be seeing our land being wrenched to pieces for the benefits, not of the people, but for the benefits and the profits of the World Economic Forum? And to the gentleman over here from the South Americas, are you aware that the sacred headwaters, your land, is rich in billions and billions of dollars of lithium and copper? If you want a green transition, what's going to be having to pay the price in the sacred headwaters of your country? Thank you.
What do you want to do? I mean, do you want answers I mean, these are big questions.
Yeah.
I mean, part of what you're getting at is this well-documented resource curse, and it applies to everything that has a big value and which is visible in global commodity markets. And so what we're doing at the moment is we are replacing the social impacts and the huge economic inequalities that came in the wake of fossil fuels. It's happening again now with these so-called green transition minerals. And it's not to do necessarily with the technologies or with the end point of where these things are going. It's to do with the fact of the market not being properly regulated or being developed in a way that represents the interests of the people who are on the receiving end of the extraction. And it's diamonds, gold, oil and gas, obviously, and now for lithium and cobalt and some of these other minerals, it's the same story playing out. Who's got control of the resources? Who is going to benefit from the sale of those resources? And if it's going to lead to massive inequalities at the same time as terrible impacts on the people who live next to where the mines are, that ain't green. It's not green. It's very far from green. Then if you look at the other end of the supply chain and the extent to which these resources are fueling consumption in other countries, so not the places where the minerals are being extracted, but largely in other parts of the world, then you see the consumerism which is driving that is utterly detached from the reality of where these minerals are coming from. And those supply chains for these metals and minerals that are going into smartphones and into computers and now into data centers, solar panels, wind turbines, a whole lot of it.
Sit down.
It's invisible.
We don't have time for debate. I'm sorry.
It's invisible. It's invisible to people. So what do? How do we raise awareness and make these questions more visible? And I think, that remains work in progress, and it does come in the end to some really quite challenging messages for many people in the West about using up less stuff, which is something that we have found it extremely difficult to talk about when it comes to environmental and sustainability questions in Western countries over several decades. Always, the question is, what is the green alternative? And almost never, how do I avoid using this stuff in the first place? Like energy, for example. Whether it's solar, wind, gas, nuclear, or coal, a very good start would be to try to use less of it to begin with. That discussion is almost nowhere to be seen. So it's a big cultural issue we're dealing with, as well as a practical one, in my opinion.
It's a very, very, very big question, but we really appreciate it. We're going to have to wrap up because we're running out of time, and we do need to clear the building. Would Domingo like to respond very quickly?
Sí. Su preocupación muy interesante y es verdad. Todo tecnología que crea el ser humano tiene impacto negativo. Pero también para hacer la transición verdadera no depende de naturaleza, depende de uno mismo. Si yo quiero hacer una transición verdadera, yo debo cambiar mi forma de pensar, mi forma de trabajar con corazón a la madre tierra, a la sociedad, a la naturaleza. Ahí es verdadera transición.
So everything you said is absolutely true. All technologies that man makes have basically unintended consequences, and in this case, a lot of destructive consequences, especially around this idea of transition. And what I would say is, for me, the conclusion I've reached is that what we're talking about is ecological transition, but what we really need is a human transition, our transition in our consciousness, our transition in the way we see the world, the way we treat nature, the way we see and live on this earth, and our cosmology. We need to shift the way we see the world, value the world, and what we value. And that has to happen in our hearts and in our minds at the individual level, in every one of us, in order to have true transition.
Y lo más importante también es no acumular para ambición, es hacer para consumo de bienestar. Ahí está la gran diferencia del concepto del mundo indígena con mundo occidental. Yo quiero más dinero, más riqueza, y eso da impacto de cualquier manera, de manera negativa en especial. El pueblo indígena no quiere llenar dinero en el banco, riqueza material, no. El pueblo indígena quiere vida real, amor, paz, libertad, aire puro. Ese es el concepto indígena.
And so, for us also, the concept of material wealth becomes central to this conversation. Greed, wanting more and more, material accumulation of wealth is the drive right now in the current modern world. And economic growth, the infinite growth of everything, is our kind of consciousness. But for indigenous peoples, we talk about well-being when we read this concept, this philosophy of well-being, which is really about not material wealth. It's exactly the opposite. It's about harmony. It's about living well, a good life, happiness, joy, love, clean air, clean water, living in harmony with each other. That is what indigenous people aren't filling their bank accounts with material wealth, with financial wealth. We're really talking about some level of living in well-being, and a collective well-being. And that's a philosophical conversation that we have to have about our drive. Is it personal, material, greed, and accumulation, or is it collective well-being around harmony, love, joy, and the things that truly make life meaningful?
El concepto moderno, lo que dice el hermano, es cómo bajar el consumo. Es lo clave para frenar todo problema climático y sanarnos nosotros mismos.
And the modern, Tony's, basic assumption or basic proposal that we have to reduce consumption, reduce the material consumption, and really seek to be in harmony, in joy with one another. I say those are complementary. We need to do both.
I think we really got to the heart of the matter. Thank you ever so much, Tony, Dan, Domingo, Atosa, thank you. Thank you so much.